Hello, everyone. Welcome back to eChannel News. I'm your host, Paolo Dunley-Bletto. Why is SIEM struggling to meet the high demand brought on by massive data? And what I mean by SIEM, I mean security, information, and event management, in case you're wondering. Here to talk about this and a lot more is Matteo Rebeschini, the Strategic Solutions Engineer for Hydrolix. Hydrolix is a Portland, Oregon based real time data platform operational intelligence vendor. Matteo, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Paulo.
No problem. Glad you're here. So let's start with a simple question. How are SIEMs transforming today?
So I've seen I've been working in the SIEM or SAM, depending who you talk to, they pronounce it in different ways, space for I guess over 10 years now.
Mhm.
And more recently, I was at Elastic before Hydrolix, where I was really working with the largest customers, both enterprises and MSSPs.
Mhm.
And I've seen for many years that when you really are getting to the limits of what the platforms were designed for, organizations start using different components in a way around the SIEM to augment them, right? Using the SIEM less and less for, as an only one solution as it was originally designed for. And that is becoming more real now, where we're seeing agentic AI, agentic SecOps coming into play as well. And it shows more and more that SIEMs were designed for humans, and truly designed to solve a specific problem that when you start hitting scale challenges or unique situations, they don't really adapt that easily. And this is particularly relevant also for MSSPs that have unique needs when it comes to SIEMs.
So, what's Hydraulics' role in this SIEM transformation?
So Hydrolix built a real-time data platform for internet scale operations that has become basically they were able to solve something that, to my knowledge, hasn't been solved by any other company, that is CDN monitoring. And if
Mhm.
you know anything about CDN, you know that the volume is huge. And those
Mhm.
are typically logs that are not ingested in SAMs, even in SIEMs, even though you get a lot of visibility over what's going on
Mhm.
from the outside in.
Yep.
And that's also becoming more and more relevant these days with agents, with bots that are that are making up the majority of the internet traffic.
Very
So what
true.
Hydraulic built is basically a data platform that can operate at very, very large scale,
Mhm.
with very high compression on disk, allowing to scale at that level to the level that any SAM really wouldn't be able to today.
So, in the past, and I'm talking like maybe 10 years ago, companies like invested in a SIEM, or maybe they worked through a partner to get a SIEM, just for speed of detection primarily. Is that still the case, or is there more to it now?
So, in my experience, there are different types of SIM users.
Hmm.
Many companies, especially the small, mid-sized companies, they have compliance requirements where they have to have a
Okay.
SIM. And
Yep.
for them, I worked as a consultant as well, deploying SIM. So I've seen what they truly care about. And in many cases, it was just I want to get those compliance reports for the auditors,
Hmm.
showing that we're doing our due diligence and due care when it comes to security. So you have that those type of customers, and then as companies become bigger, brands are important, the reputation is important, then security becomes more important all of a sudden, right? It's not just compliance, but it's security. And when you start caring about security, you care about speed of detection and speed of response as well. So that's when we want to make sure that you can detect and address issues before they become problems.
Hmm.
And that's where speed matters.
So SIEMs, so in my experience with SIEMs, always been for a big business
Hmm?
opportunity. Is there a role for SIEMs in the SMB?
Certainly so. Certainly so. If you're dealing with, again, if you're an SMB, again, depends on the size of the SMB, right?
Of course.
I've seen many situations where, for example, companies that never had a SIEM, they looked into getting cyber insurance. that
Hmm.
will require them to get a SIEM. So suddenly that
That's
becomes
right.
a need, right? I need to have a
Yeah,
SIEM because it's like, how can I ensure you if you're leaving the gates open, you're not even looking, right? You're not even
that's right.
monitoring what's
Yeah,
happening.
you got to secure
And
at least the perimeter to get insurance. Yep.
and that totally makes sense. And then, but again, in SMBs, usually, it's you don't have the talent. It's very hard, as you probably know, to hire and retain
Hmm.
security talent, specifically security analysts, because it's a very tedious job where it's, you tend to lose more than winning in a way
Hmm.
because adversaries always have an advantage.
Yeah.
But with SMBs, many SMBs, they rely on MSSPs. Basically, they outsource they use an outsourced service to as a SIEM for
Hmm.
monitoring. And I used to work in a healthcare company many years ago before starting working for cybersecurity, and we did exactly the same. We couldn't have 24/7 monitoring. We were too small.
Hmm.
And then we were working with big hospitals that they expected us to protect the security data of their patients
Of
and the
course.
privacy and all of that. And so in those cases, it made perfect sense for us at the time to outsource, to use an MSSP for that.
So you mentioned MSSP. What's the play as you see it for the MSP and MSSP channel?
So the play is there are two different there are many different types of MSSPs, and I especially during my time at Elastic, I work with many MSSPs trying to help them really address their unique needs because
Hmm.
they're trying to basically replicate a template across their different customers, right? They want to be able to scale, to move quickly, and many SAMs are not really designed, with multi-tenancy at that level and with the features that many MSSPs need.
Hmm.
So on one side, you have MSSPs that are basically working with many smaller SMBs, dentist offices, and things like that. That they
Hmm.
have very limited amount of data, and in that case, it will be cost prohibitive even to have a SAM just for that amount of data. So it makes sense to use an MSSP that uses a SAM with
Right.
multi-tenancy and
Yeah.
sharing the cost across multiple different clients. As the size of so many MSSPs, they specifically focus on those smaller SMB realities, and there are many out there that are dealing with HIPAA and PCI and things like that, credit cards. Like you need to be able to protect them and to check those compliance boxes for the auditors. And what I've seen in the recent past is also in a way, the emergence more and more of larger companies, even enterprises, that they don't want to stuff a SOC anymore.
Hmm.
They may start with like SOC augmentation and with an MSSP for like follow the sun 24/7 monitoring. But in many cases, they just, outsource almost completely. But in those cases, they have their own SAM deployment that is, just for them, no multi-tenancy. They have some data, they care where the data is stored, where the data is processed. And so in those cases, they hire an MSSPs basically to help them with the deployment and the management and the ongoing monitoring for them. That may be a combination of, a small internal team augmented by the MSSP or just, truly just security leadership and management within the company and letting the MSSP do most of it.
Cool. I wanted to get into some issues with you, Matteo,
Yeah.
regarding SIEM from your perspective. What are some of the hot button issues with hot data as opposed to cold storage?
Yeah. So the challenge in a sense, so the initial objective in a sense, right, is to be able to detect any signs of compromise
Hmm.
and basically address them before there is any damage, before there is any damage to the company, the business, the brand, and so on. So there is this need, in a way, to have very fast detection and response, and that's becoming more and more semi-automated in a way with the emergence
Yeah,
of
well, no, you're right.
software.
There is a lot of automation that is going
Yeah,
in.
there is a lot of automation that because you wanna. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's very, I've met many different analysts, and specifically the tier one analysts that are
Mhm.
those that are looking at those alarms coming in, and they have to make that determination. Is this a true positive, false positive? Should we be concerned about this? It's a very tedious, repetitive job that, and they tend to burn out very easily. So there has been
Okay.
this emerging need in a way to automate tier one, tier two as much as possible because, it's a challenge to hire those people and to retain them because of how tedious that job, with those, alarm fatigue, they call it in the
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, it's true.
So once you get those basically alarms in, you identify an issue, there is a need to figure out how did it start, right? That's when it's important to be able to search historical data to find that initial compromise. Make sure that you find that weakness or that, how did it happen? We want to make sure that it won't happen again. And
Mhm.
that's when there is a need to search all their data. Uh, Traditional SAMs, they were built in a way that requires compute attached to storage in order to search those logs.
Mhm.
So the economics really don't play really well as you scale because you need to pay for a lot of compute that is just sitting there,
Mhm.
not really doing anything until you search that older data. And those queries may be very infrequent. But when you have an investigation going, you want to be able to get fast answers from the data, right? You want to be able
Of
to get
course.
those fast answers. So what many SEMs did as a way also to optimize the use of resources, to not use, even just at the storage level, to not use, fast SSD, for everything, use
Mhm.
maybe, slower spinning disks for older data. They introduced what they call in the space data tiering, right? So you have
Oh,
hot,
okay.
cold, frozen, and data is moved from one tier to the next as the data ages, ending up in a tier that is called frozen, that is not related to Glacier with AWS Glacier, but it gives the idea of something that needs to be defrosted before you can search it, right? And uh, and that by itself as being and it is the reality for many SAMs today, right? If you want to search older data, you may have to wait a day or two before you can even search the data.
Mhm.
And that's not uncommon. And things are changing also when it comes to that, other than the need for rehydration in many cases, where you need to restore the data into a SAM or DSAM or just a SAM that is the same vendor that you use just to search all their
Mhm.
data. So it's a very manual, lengthy, error-prone process to deal with. It can be very frustrating. And
Actually, very, very complex the way you just outlined it.
yeah, it's very complex, and you kind of have to know in a way also as an analyst. I need to search data older than X days. Then I need to use this different process in order to search the data. I may
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
find those archives. I need to basically, it's not like the backup tapes that, that people, of our generation may have experienced, some of us.
Yeah.
But kind of, right? You need to basically find it, restore it,
Yeah.
and then search it. And recently, this is specific to European financial institutions. There is a recent regulation called DORA that basically mandates these financial institutions that to date they have been required to keep those audit logs for 5 years just to keep the data. Now
Mhm.
they need to prove that they can search it. And now this is causing
Wow.
all sorts of headaches to this, all
Yeah,
these
it's another
financial
it's
institutions.
another thing on top of the pile. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah.
how do I do that? Because I cannot afford to store it in the SAM because it wasn't designed to deal with all that scale. And so that in a way as all these considerations in a way, the role of automation that is more and more relevant, the need to be able to access data at the speed of AI has really changed the conversation a little bit when it comes to SAMs. Is like, is the SAM still needed in a way as you have all these best in breed tools around the SAM to do all these things that the SAM was originally designed to do as an only one solution. But ultimately, you need a better data layer, a better data lake where you can, store more data and be able to access that data at the speed of, a chat GPT conversation, really,
Yeah.
regardless that's really what we're seeing. And I was at Black Hat USA last week, and that was like, one of the conversations out there that many people were asking is like, do we still need a SAM? Do we still need to pay for a SAM? Giving how the industry is moving in a way. And this
Mhm.
particularly makes sense for, again, larger enterprises and MSSPs that deal with higher volumes and more critical type of requirements.
What about retention of blind spots? Is there an issue there?
So if it's a blind spot, you don't have anything to retain because you're not seeing it, right? So that's the thing with the economics of a SAM that many SAMs historically they license based on ingest. So you have a license that is limiting you in a way, but you also have compute resources that are limiting how much data you can ingest. So historically, there is always this decision that security leaders have to make within a company. Again, their role is to manage risk, and they have to decide what visibility, what log sources are more important from a risk perspective than others. Where can I afford to not have visibility? Basically, what logs can I afford to drop on the floor without even ingesting them? So that is, and it's really hard to know uh, what logs may be useful tomorrow, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
there are
yeah.
always new threats, and certain log sources may not be seen as very critical today, but they may become critical tomorrow all of a sudden. Also, something that many companies that they have been focusing historically, and this is like starting before the emergence of hyperscalers and cloud and SaaS on network data, because network tells you everything. Now that's becoming even more challenging because with SaaS log sources, you have all these new vendors that you use, and the number is really really high. And a lot of focus there is also on identity, right? Who is accessing what and with what permission, are there permissions that an account has that shouldn't have, and that type of monitoring that may be relevant. And also a type of monitoring that is really overlooked, in my opinion, and it has been for the longest time, is what truly makes up the revenue generating engine of many companies,
Hmm.
application logs. If you
Yeah.
have a customer facing application and that makes up basically a big part of your public attack surface, and you're just ignoring those logs, you don't have an initiative to see what's happening at the application level, what you expose, what your customers use. That has always been an afterthought, and it is still today, it is an afterthought, in my opinion. I see many companies that they see, okay, we're struggling to get the budget to get this list of most important log sources,
Hmm.
and we believe we get the most important value for these, and we're just ignoring everything else. As a,
Sorry, Matteo, you
yeah.
brought up budgets. I wanted to specifically ask you about budgets for SIEMs. From my experience, they always tend to be seven-figure endeavors, right? Any plans that it could be more affordable in the future?
So it's I think that the industry as a whole, again, talking about enterprises specifically, right? Larger enterprises, and those are those that are paying the highest cost, and it's also a cost that is hard to predict. There is this exercise, I've been working in sales engineering primarily, and there is this scoping exercise that you have to do, making a determination like how much capacity do I need,
Hmm.
right? When you start talking to a vendor and they tell you, okay, give me an idea of how many log sources I have, you have, and the volume. But if someone never had a SAM,
Hmm.
and I work specifically with companies like that, like large companies that are name brands, like in the gaming industry, that were preparing to go public, never had a SAM before,
Hmm.
never ingested logs before. they have no idea of how many logs they need to ingest because they have
Yeah.
never ingested them before. So there is that challenge that is really hard to predict. This is how much it's going to cost. And it's common that the ultimate cost is higher than what you expect
Yes.
because
So this can be
the vendors, they don't want to really tell you, okay, it's like we need to look at worst case scenario. They want to win
of
the deal, so they give you one size
course.
based on your budget, right? Based on what you
Mhm.
know the prospect shares, and then once they start ingesting logs, they realize that things are different. And so that said, what has been my experience again with enterprises and also with MSSPs, once you start working with large enterprises with that use a SAM, they hit those limits of a SAM and they have challenges with staffing the SOC and automation, case management, and ticketing. And so they start using, in addition to the SAM, all these best in breed technologies like from SOAR to ticketing system to data pipelines to really modify the logs or to route them differently at ingest. So you start using all these other pieces around the SAM when you get to the point that you truly use the SAM only as a database, as a data layer. You're
Mhm.
not really leveraging all these other features that are useful. I'm not saying that they're not, but were more designed for smaller companies that need an only one solution. And
Right.
also were designed for humans that look at the dashboard and respond to alerts using the user interface. Now with SOAR that is evolving to agentic SecOps,
Mhm.
that paradigm is changing as well, right? Because you no longer need to you don't use those interfaces. I remember when I was at Elastic, specifically the largest customer, they were not using the UI of Elastic Security because they had their own scripts, they have their own plumbing, there are other tools that they will use. So I think as soon as that, and we're seeing this happening as we speak, really pushed by this emergence of all these new players in the agentic SecOps, existing players that are adapting to that are evolving to include, the use of LLMs for investigations. That if you come to the realization that you're paying for all these capabilities that the SAM provides, and you're only using a part of it, then you can find opportunities to spend less, right? Because then you can see, okay, you start like taking a step back and look at what you're doing. It's like, why
Yeah.
do I keep paying for all these features that I don't use?
Of course. Yeah. So even that's a process.
Yeah, that's a process, and
Yeah.
it's delicate because of the high risk. It's like an average SAM replacement, based in my experience, is up to 1 year for an enterprise from start to end. So
Yeah.
it's not something that you take easily,
You don't take it
and it
lightly
also
for
is.
sure.
And you have like the auditors in a way that are
Mhm.
like, looking at it in a way, even if you think about them, right? You
Yeah.
cannot have a gap in visibility.
No, you
You want to
can't.
make sure that when you make that migration, you're not
Yeah.
missing out on anything, right? And that you get feature parity, you get the same reports that you had before, the same visibility. So it's a lengthy, risky process that CISOs especially they do very carefully. And then of course there is the human factor. The human factor of you have like a core team of SOC analysts that are very trained on and comfortable using a specific SAM. It's like changing religion in a way, right? It's like going to an Oracle DBA and say, okay, now I want you to use SQL Server starting tomorrow, and it's like, okay, I'm going to change job. It's like this is my thing. It's like
Yeah.
as soon as whenever they have that a vendor name as part of their title, it's really hard also to make a move thinking about the human capital that you have.
Yeah, that could be a mountain to climb for sure. I wanted to ask about hydraulics. A recent report that you guys released there about widening the gap between the speed of AI driven bots as a threat, right, and the
Yeah.
pace of organizational response. What's the latest there?
So that's related to to the CDN web applicator WAF type of observability that
Mhm.
Hydrolix has become popular with, right? And Hydrolix today is known by many as we white label a product called Traffic Peak by
Mhm.
Akamai. So whenever all
Yeah,
Akamai customers they have access to Hydrolix to Traffic Peak, and the initial use case in a way of observability for CDN, and by the way, this is something that for me that I've been security for many years is new because you cannot afford to get CDN telemetry into a SIEM. It's just too much data.
it's
And once
pretty.
you
I
start to
know.
see, yeah,
Yeah,
once you start
I've read
seeing
about that. Yeah, it's crazy.
the insights you get from that,
Mhm.
and then specifically the bot traffic, that is mind blowing to know that today the majority of the internet traffic is not human generated, bots. Even now, when you go and search Google and or search engine, and you have like the AI that is plugged into that is going back doing searches for you. So it's
I know.
there is a lot of that, and so when it comes to and many of the existing customers of Hydraulics in the CDN space are large media companies. So and the companies that that do events like soccer, football, cricket, you name it,
Mhm.
or streaming. And they
Yeah.
monitor these events basically in a war room as if, we want to see how the CDN performs. We want to make sure that there are no disruption. And if there is a disruption to the user experience on the other end, that we can intervene as quickly as possible. So for that, it's very important to be able to get what we call time to glass. And the role is to be able to get like from an event is, when you see the initial disruption, the initial error to when you can detect it, that has to be really short amount of time, like a few seconds. And that applies, the same applies to security, really. It's like whenever you see like a critical error or something, an alert, you want to be able to respond to it as quickly as possible. So that's one part of it. And then there is the speed of query, be able to query that data very quickly, even if the
Yeah.
volume is so huge.
Yeah,
So
you mentioned security. I want to ask you about that because you came out with a really interesting statement, and I want to like understand more about it. Like you said, the cyber crooks or cyber criminals are blending more than attacking. What do you mean by that?
yeah, it's that they're hard to find.
Oh, okay.
They're hard to
Okay,
attack.
so they're
They
hiding in the shadows like always.
they're right
Then
in the shadows, right? It's
okay.
but that's what a good good attackers. That's what they
So do
do.
you mean
They don't
like
want to be
because
caught.
no, of course, but do you mean like like I remember at RSA, there was a rumor that Iranian cyber criminals were there as well, right? And they blended in with all the other like Americans and Europeans and Canadians as well. Because before, like you would know who the threat actors are, right, or the nation
Yeah,
states, but now you're saying like it's hard to detect.
it's hard to detect. You have traffic made by bots in that context that you were just talking
Oh,
about.
that's
That
true
looks
too.
like
Yeah,
that.
that's
It,
true
it,
too.
it
Yeah,
looks like that it's human traffic,
yeah.
and that's what they're trying to do. It's like trying to fly under the radar.
Mm,
Like for example, traditional detections in SAMs that are public in many cases
right.
to me are almost pointless if you just use that because adversaries can see what you're looking for. And they
Yeah.
know that if you have like a simple threshold based rule that you're looking at a specific number of events within a certain amount of time, they just fly right under that. Right. And that's where newer methodologies of detections, many like user entity behavior analytics, machine learning, based that they became more popular in a way because they allow you to really see what's unusual, and that's specifically relevant for unusual behavior, compromised accounts. Like for uh, in my experience, that's top of mind for most enterprises. It's like detecting compromised accounts and malicious insiders because of the how easy phishing attacks
Right.
have become, especially now with AI and LLMs, where they can fake voices. They can. It's
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
that's
Yeah.
what's really top of mind to many, more so than the traditional, network level. thing. Because phishing attacks are
Yeah.
easier.
So Matteo, what's the future look for in SIEMs, in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, there is going to be we're going to see the emergence more and more of agentic SecOps as a next evolution of what SOAR started, right? SOAR started as a mean to automate workflows, even though when SOAR by itself, the way it started, are very prescriptive and
Mhm.
deterministic, right? If you following playbooks, same playbooks that were given to analysts in the past. If you see these, do that, and then do that, and see if it's a false positive or not, and then escalate if it's a concern. LLMs allow to make that more that process more intelligent. So there is going to be more automation, smarter automation. I still think that there will always be a human in the loop when it comes to automating response, especially when you're dealing with mission critical applications, revenue generating application. Before you disable an account or block an IP, you want to have someone kind of look into that until you gain trust in AI making the right choice. I think it's a matter of time until those will be automated. But I do think that there's going to be more and more, attention to the spending of companies. The budget is typically always the same. It's just how you choose to allocate those
Yeah,
dollars.
exactly. Right.
And as you invest more in these new agentic AI, agentic SecOps, maybe you can save a little more on the FTEs. You need less, few team members, SOC analysts, because you can automate tier one, tier two. And maybe you start looking at the SAM and you realize, oh, I'm not really using much of the SAM anymore because guess what? Agentic SecOps now is doing detection as well. So I'm truly using the SAM just as a data layer. Why do I have to pay for it?
It's
When
true.
I could use
True.
a data layer.
Very, very interesting. Matteo, that's amazing insight on SIEM and how it's transforming and what the future looks like. Really appreciate it. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about you specifically.
Yeah.
What are some of your likes and dislikes
In life.
in life? Yes.
In life, I do love traveling and hiking, exploring nature, but I truly like I enjoy what I think it's a privilege to spend part of my time in Italy, part of my time in the United States, and be exposed to different cultures and different point of views, and ultimately, what the realization I had recently is that we are very very similar, even though we look very different. And I always enjoy talking to people, meeting people, and finding common ground.
I totally agree with you. It's totally a melting pot, isn't it? Or a
Yeah.
mosaic, as I like to say. Well, Matteo, thank you very much for your time. Where can people follow you and follow maybe Hydrolix?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. You can
Mhm.
follow me there. Hydrolix.io is our website, and you'll hear more from us in the future when it comes to our security data layer offering that is specific to this conversation, right? Working more and more on those opportunities these days.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time. There you have it from Matteo Rebeschini from Hydrolix. We're talking about SIEM today. I want to thank him. I also want to thank you, the viewer out there, for continuing to tune into eChannel News. That's it for me, Paul Deliblato. Until next time, so long.